This is episode number 54 of the Fine Dining Podcast. Welcome to Providence, host of the 2013 Taste Trekkers Food Tourism Conference.
This is the Fine Dining Podcast. The Fine Dining Podcast. For foodies who love travel and travelers who love food. Here's your host, Seth Ressler.
Hello and welcome to the Fine Dining Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Seth Ressler, and this is the podcast for foodies who love travel and travelers who love food. Each week we go to a different city and we talk to somebody who really knows the local culinary scene, and we talk to them about what's going on in the dining scene in their city. Often it's a food blogger, sometimes it's a chef, sometimes, like it is today, we've got a food tour operator, somebody who actually gives food tours in that city. Today we're talking to Cindy Silvato, who runs Savoring Rhode Island in Providence, Rhode Island. Cindy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Seth.
We're going to talk a lot about Providence today, and one of the things I want to do is preview this city because you have been instrumental in helping me shape the Taste Trekkers Food Tourism Conference and really getting this conference up and off the ground. This is the nation's first food tourism conference that we're doing this fall, and first of all, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done to help me put this together.
It's my pleasure. And thanks for coming to Providence.
Well, absolutely. It's a great city. I mean, you know, and so people know, I mean, I lived there for a long time. I came out there for the first time to go to college there. I went to Brown University up on the hill, and then I graduated and I left. I went into radio and worked at stations all over the country, and then came back to run a radio station there and then an events company and some other stuff. So I think it's a fantastic city. I left there 3 years ago, and it's actually gotten better, particularly in terms of food, in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to come back. I'm excited to see all the things that are going on there.
We can't wait to have you.
So let's talk a little bit about you, though. First of all, you're the president of Savoring Rhode Island, which is a food tourism company. Before that, you were actually teaching, right? You were over at Johnson & Wales.
I was teaching pastry arts over at Johnson & Wales, 13 years.
Wow.
And that's how I started my tourism company. I actually used to take my students on tours around New England, and that's how Savoring Rhode Island was born.
So let's talk about Johnson & Wales, because this is a fantastic university, particularly for things like food and hospitality, that's right there in Providence.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about the university.
Well, Johnson & Wales University is a fabulous culinary college. It was actually started by Miss Johnson and Miss Wales as a secretarial school, and it grew and grew and grew. And the culinary college has become just a force to be reckoned with. The curriculum is fabulous, it's modern, it's terrific, and the chefs that come to teach there are also world-class. And because of Johnson & Wales being in Providence, a lot of fabulous restaurants are born.
You see a lot of alumni, stay in the area and start their own thing.
Exactly.
Who are some of the chefs that are Johnson & Wales alums?
Well, our old favorite, of course, is Emeril Lagasse. He is actually born and raised just outside of Providence. Although he didn't stay here, he certainly has left his mark here in Rhode Island. Brian Kingsford from Bacaro is an alum. Derek Wagner from Nick's on Broadway is an alum. And if you haven't been there, it's a really terrific, terrific restaurant. And he's a young, modern chef who was part of the whole Trace and Trust program where they track the fish from the ocean to the table.
Yep, so Trace and Trust is actually, they're running a session at the Taste Trekkers Food Tourism Conference.
And that'll be fascinating.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of alum and a lot of line cooks, too, that have stayed back.
So you were teaching for 13 years at Johnson & Wales, and you said that's what led to you launching a food tourism company?
Right. I used to take my students on field trips all the time because I always thought that the classroom teaching was one thing, but coming from working in the industry for many years, I thought that they really needed to see a lot of the real world. So I took them to a lot of tours. I took them to Boston, I took them to Vermont, and then ultimately I ended up having a tour on Federal Hill with my students if we could have perfect attendance for class. And that worked a lot, and it was a huge draw, and I said to myself, wow, I think everybody needs to be reintroduced to Federal Hill. And 10 years later, we're going really strong. Got a really great food tour going.
All right, so we're going to get into Federal Hill, and we're going to get into Providence. We're going to get into some of those areas. But before we do that, I know you've got a trivia question for me.
I do. It is, where can you find an authentic DOP pizzeria in Providence, Rhode Island?
Where can you find an authentic DOP pizzeria?
And let me put it like this, an Italian certified pizzeria.
Yeah, that was going to be my first question, is what does DOP mean? Because
and DOP means Denominazione Origine Protetta.
Oh, of course, I knew that.
Right. And you might also hear it as PVO, but most commonly it's DOP. And it's a certificate from the Italian government that what is being made or what has been made is authentic, regional, and created according to a certain set of standards. Really?
So a restaurant that serves pizza can actually go out and get this certificate?
Yeah, and it's a little challenging to do that because you have to, in this case, you have to have somebody come from Italy. You have to have certain ingredients that are being used. You know, they're looking at all kinds of criteria in order to meet the certification. So for DOP pizzeria, you have to use 00 flour,
Yep.
San Marzano tomatoes, buffalo mozzarella, and fresh chopped basil for the top. That's for margarita pizza. The margarita is named for Queen Margherita, the Queen of Italy, and the colors on the pizza are the colors of the Italian flag. Now, to have the 00 flour, which can be a little challenging to get, the San Marzano tomatoes from the area around Vesuvius where there's lots of volcanic ash, so the tomatoes that grow there are fabulous from the minerals from the volcanic soil, if you will, and the buffalo mozzarella. So to be trained to do all those things, to have a wood oven, and then to apply for the certification is a pretty big deal.
Now, do they also require that if the pizza doesn't arrive in 30 minutes or less, it's free?
A really good DO pizza should arrive in 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right. Good to know. All right.
Because the oven is so screaming hot, it goes really fast.
All right. I got to think about it. I'm going to go on a limb and say I don't think it's Domino's. I don't think it's Pizza Hut. But I'm going to think about this. We're going to come back to this.
Okay.
While I do, let's talk about Providence. And give me the lay of the land. I mean, for somebody who's never been to Providence before, tell me about the city sort of in general.
Well, the city's fabulous because the city's really easy to get around, and what I recommend is that people come by car so they can get from one neighborhood to the other. There's plenty of parking. You can get from Thayer Street to downtown to Federal Hill and then over to Broadway, and just in an afternoon, and you can get from one place to another and drive really easily.
And let's talk about some of the neighborhoods, because there's the west side, there's the east side, there's downtown. Walk me through some of those.
My favorite neighborhood, of course, is the neighborhood that I do tours in at Federal Hill. Federal Hill is the Italian neighborhood. In late 1800s, early 1900s, 54,000 Italians came to settle on Federal Hill. And they actually came in through the Port of Providence, which was a very busy port. They didn't come in through New York or Boston. They actually came into Providence. And what's really fascinating about the number of 54,000 Italians is that in an earlier census, there were only 2 Italians living in Rhode Island. I think it was 1837. So it was like just shot through the roof. And now we have more Italians per capita in Rhode Island than any state in the Union. And there are some towns actually in Rhode Island where you can't even run for office unless your last name ends in a vowel. So that's how heavily populated with Italians Rhode Island is. And they all come from the area of Federal Hill. So Federal Hill's kind of always been like an immigrant community. Almost every immigrant group has wound up on Federal Hill. The Irish were there from the Irish potato famine. Then the Italians came in. Then you have North Africans, Cambodians, Laotians, and now we have a big Guatemalan community up on the hill. But the retail stores and the restaurants are mostly Italian. They've had the strongest hold in the neighborhood as far as retail goes. So we have fabulous restaurants, fabulous retail shops. You can get, Italian groceries, all kinds of really fabulous things up on Federal Hill.
Federal Hill is over on the west side, which is sort of considered the more artsy area of Providence in a lot of ways.
Right, and Federal Hill is kind of almost divided into 2 different neighborhoods. Even though it's all Federal Hill, we have the Broadway area of Federal Hill where all kinds of new restaurants and bistros are popping up, including Nick's on Broadway. And as you go down the street, it's lined with fabulous little restaurants and trattorias. And that's the more urban, if you will, the younger, lots of young artists living in that area. And then you walk toward Atwell's Avenue, which is the more Italian-centric part of town. And then you've got more old-world restaurants and shops and art galleries over there.
And where do you do your culinary walking tour?
I focus on the more old world Italian neighborhood. And it's great because, like, for example, if you're up there on Federal Hill, one fabulous bakery is called Shallow Brothers Bakery. And Shallow Brothers has been there since 1916, and they're still baking in the same gorgeous, over 100-year-old brick ovens that they've been baking in all these years, and everything gets baked in those ovens. It's very cool. So there's a real sense of history and tradition up on the hill with how people cook and how people work. It's wonderful.
So talk to me about some of the foods that Providence is known for and that people should check out if they're coming in.
It's really funny because for years I've always said to myself that you can't really have a restaurant without having calamari on the menu. And some restaurants try to not have calamari on the menu, and now it's the state appetizer. It's official.
Right. And there's actually a Rhode Island style calamari. Like there's a style named for the state, right?
Exactly, and it's actually a Portuguese-style calamari. And so you fry the tentacles and the rings together, and then it's sautéed in garlic, olive oil, and pepper ring. And the first time I had that when I came to Rhode Island, now 20 years ago, I thought, this is the best thing I ever had. Who needs marinara sauce? This is it. And that is now the state appetizer. So definitely when you come to Rhode Island, somewhere you have to have calamari. And then what's really great about the food in Rhode Island is just how it's evolving into a really fabulous local farm-to-table scene here in Rhode Island. Even some of the old-fashioned restaurants are getting a lot of their produce locally. Like, for example, Zuma comes out here to the western part of the state where I live, and there's a fabulous organic garlic farm, and that's where they get their garlic. Plus, they grow all their own tomatoes on the roof, and then they have relationships with farmers around the state. And Bacaro, Dow City, in the downtown area on the Riverwalk, they probably are one of the original restaurants to do farm-to-table cooking, and along with New Rivers, another really great restaurant. And because of the whole farm-to-table movement, there are new farms popping up.
Oh, that's cool. That is actually generating enough to drive new farms. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You said a couple of things that I want to pick up on. First of all is this phrase, down city. And second, the river. I want to talk a little bit about that. So tell me what down city is and tell me about this river.
Okay. So down city is the financial district, the downtown area, and it got its name Down City. That's an old Rhode Island way of talking about downtown. You go in Down City, and so there's a lot of really great restaurants there. And then the Riverwalk is the new area that's really up and coming. It's where Waterfire is. People come from all over New England to come and watch these beautiful cauldrons being lit at night, and the music is playing, and people are eating at the restaurants along the river, and it's quite a beautiful scene.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Waterfire, because there's actually going to be one the Saturday night, September 21st, of the Food Tourism Conference. And if you've never been to Providence, I mean, this is an amazing thing to see.
It is. Waterfire is terrific. And because of Waterfire, I think it's really just catapulted Providence into the public eye. I think Waterfire really did it for everybody.
You mentioned the cauldrons and the fire, but explain a little bit more about, who else comes out and how big it is. And
around the Riverwalk that runs through the city, there are these beautiful cauldrons that are lined up through the middle that get filled with some gorgeous wood, and then fire starters will go from one cauldron to the other and light it. While they're lighting the fire, music is playing, some beautiful haunting music is playing in the background, and people are just kind of naturally drawn to this gorgeous music, and it's kind of primal, if you will. Along the river on Waterfire nights, as well as other days of the week, there are gondoliers. So if you want to be right in the water, you can hire a gondola, and they'll take you up the river, and you can see it from the water.
I've never done that. Have you?
Oh, yeah, it's great.
That sounds awesome.
And on Waterfire night, book early for a restaurant table, because they go really fast.
It's tough. And we should remind anybody that's coming in for the Food Tourism Conference to book your hotel early if you're coming in from another city, because those hotels are going to fill up fast because there is a Waterfire that evening. Let's talk about some of the other chefs. Who are some of the notable chefs that we should be on the lookout for? in Providence?
I personally love Derek Wagner at Nick's on Broadway. His food is so fresh. They buy meat, they buy the whole animal, and nothing gets wasted. It's a really super neighborhood restaurant. And I love Bo Vestal at New Rivers. That's another really great restaurant down in the city. And for Italian chef, I really love Marcello Florio. He's actually new at Zuma up on Federal Hill. He's been there for about a year now. He was a chef in Florida, and he came up here, and he has been putting Zuma on the map left and right, and it's terrific. They make beautiful pastas by hand, and now you can buy pasta and take it home from the restaurant, then you can cook it yourself at home, so it's great.
And before, you and I were talking, and you told me that Andrew Zimmern had come to town for Bizarre Foods, and that you had helped show him around.
Yes, that was very exciting. He did our tour of Federal Hill, and I worked for the production company organizing the folks on the Hill, which was terrific and great fun. And actually, Marcello was one of the chefs on the Hill, and he made a soup out of egg yolks and chicken broth for Andrew Zimmern.
So we're going to come back in just a second, and we are not only going to find out the answer to your trivia question. I got to figure out where I get a DOP certified pizza in Providence, but we are also going to get a restaurant recommendation from you. I'm very excited about that. And then we're going to play a game called Out of the Frying Pan. I hope you're ready for that. Before we get back to Cindy, we've obviously been talking a lot about the Taste Trekkers Food Tourism Conference. Go check it out on the website TasteTrekkerscom. Now, we've relaunched the Taste Trekkers website, and it's very cool because now this fine dining podcast lives there at TasteTrekkerscom. Our mystery meat dinners that we've been running forever have now been moved over to TasteTrekkerscom, and we are creating a new database of food events and food tours. So if you are a Taste Trekker, if you're the type of person who plans your vacation around food, TasteTrekkerscom is going to be the place where you want to start to find out all the cool food festivals and food events that are happening. So go check it out. While you're there, click on the conference tab and find out all about the Taste Trekkers Food Tourism Conference. Cindy's going to be there. A lot of other great speakers, including Chef Matt Jennings, who's been nominated for a James Beard Award a number of times. He's actually going to be our keynote speaker. We've got all kinds of cool stuff going on there. So just go look, TasteTrekkerscom. You'll like it, I promise. We are talking to Cindy Salvato. She is the founder of Savoring Rhode Island. It is a food tourism company in Providence, Rhode Island. You give tours of the Federal Hill neighborhood, the historic Italian neighborhood. You've been a key player in putting together the Taste Trekkers Food Tourism Conference. I can't thank you enough for everything you've done. And you're actually going to be on the panel discussion. So we're going to have, on Saturday afternoon, a panel discussion about food tourism that's going to be led by Gail Ciampa, who's the food editor of the Providence Journal there. And you're going to be one of our panelists and share all your thoughts about food tourism. What are you seeing in food tourism? I mean, you've been doing this for a while now. Has it changed?
Well, it's funny because food tourism is really just taking off. 10 years ago when I started, there were a couple of food tours around the country, including Michelle Toper's tour of the North End of Boston, which is a terrific tour, and she also does one of Chinatown. And she encouraged me to do this tour here in the neighborhood. And what I really see for food tourism happening is that people are zoning in on neighborhoods, and they are really learning it. They're creating relationships with people, and they're focusing on that specific neighborhood and what makes it special.
I mean, people are really seeking out that authentic experience.
Right, exactly.
Well, let's get back to your trivia question here. I asked you for a trivia question. Give it to me one more time.
Where would you find a certified Italian DOP pizzeria in Rhode Island?
Where would you find a certified DOP pizzeria in Providence? And this means that they went over to Italy and they got a special certificate that says they use all the right ingredients and right processes and all that, and the Italian government says, yep, you're real.
Right. And as a matter of fact, the Italians came here, which was great. As a matter of fact, it was a pizzaiolo is what an Italian pizza maker is called. Pizzaiolo came here, and because they take their pizza making very seriously, so much so that they have huge competitions. So the silver medal winner for the pizzaiolo competition from last year came over to make sure everything was done properly.
Okay. Now, is this a place that only does pizza?
Yes. They're connected with another restaurant, but this particular place only does pizza.
So my guess was going to be Al Forno.
No.
And the reason I guess that is because I know Al Forno is credited with inventing the wood-fired margarita pizza.
Yeah, they brought it over from Italy, definitely. They do grilled pizza.
Grilled?
Yeah, they brought grilled pizza here, to the States, yep. And they did a great job.
Yeah, oh, it's fantastic. They have a great margarita pizza over there. You should definitely... Yeah. But it's not them, huh?
Nope.
I don't know. Who is it then?
Venda Ravioli, or their restaurant is called Venda Bar, and the Venda Bar is where you get the certified DOP pizzeria. And when you go into the pizzeria, which is it's on Atwells Ave in Di Pasquale Plaza on Federal Hill, and when you go into the pizzeria, they have the beautiful oven in the back. They have the certification on the wall and framed from Italy, showing that they're authentic, and they went to great lengths to make sure that the certification went through. It's so cool.
I know Venda. That's a great place. It's been there for a while.
Yep.
It's sort of one of the anchors there, and that's a great little square there. That whole area where you can kind of do some nice outdoor eating and.
Right. And then Venda has 3 places. They have Venda Ravioli, which is the corner store, and then they have Costantino's Ristorante and Cafe, and then next to that they have Venda Bar.
And Venda Bar is where we go for the pizza.
Exactly.
I asked you for a restaurant recommendation. I said if we're coming into Providence, where should we go to eat? Tell me what you recommended.
I recommend Bacaro. I like Bacaro a lot because the food is always really fresh. I would say most of the vegetables, etc., are locally sourced. It's real Italian food from Italy, not Italian-American food, which is a completely different cuisine altogether. A lovely cuisine. It's what I was raised on. When the Italians first came here, they needed to work with what they had, so we ended up kind of like with our own cuisine, the Italian-American cuisine.
So give me an example. What are some of the differences?
Well, for example, when you go to Italy, you really don't find Parmesan, chicken Parmesan, veal Parmesan, etc., like that. That's a totally American thing.
It takes Americans to just put cheese on everything.
Exactly, and red sauce. Lasagna with ricotta cheese is totally American. Antipasto as a salad is totally American because the word antipasto in Italian means before the meal. And before the meal in Italy, you never have a salad. The salad's always at the end of the meal.
Huh.
But I like to think, how did that happen? And I think of my own Sicilian grandparents, and I know that they were just really poor, but they had a garden. So everything from the garden ended up with the antipasto. And antipasto is olives, maybe some artichokes, maybe a piece of cheese, salami, soppressata. But to make it look like they had an abundance, they added things from the garden. And that's how we have antipasto, the salad.
Gotcha. And Bacaro is Brian Kingsford's place.
Brian Kingsford and Jen Matta, yeah.
Oh, so tell me a little bit about them.
They actually got their start at El Forno, and they branched out on their own, and they opened Bacaro after Bacchus, the wine god. And this restaurant is super. As a matter of fact, one of the favorite things that I have when I go there is their antipasto selection. You know, you can get 1, 2, 3, 4 things, or you can get a board that they just make up for you, and you can sip on Prosecco and eat prosciutto and a few olives before your meal comes, and it's really terrific. And they have a really wonderful seasonal menu. One of the favorite things that I have there is this corn and clam chowder. So their clams are locally sourced from a fellow down in Bristol, Rhode Island, and the corn comes from Confreda Farm, and the potatoes too, and it's just the most, and bacon is added to it, which makes it all even more terrific. Then they have this really fabulous pasta called Pesce del Giorno, which is really means the fish of the day, but what they do is they save, a lot of the fish, and they toss it in this gorgeous creamy pasta sauce with olive oil and a little bit of cream and a little bit of lemon aioli, which is to die for, and they serve it with breadcrumbs.
That sounds fantastic.
And everybody I talk to who goes there, like, regularly, we all say, what do you have there? What do you have there? People have asked me 100 times, what have I had there? And I say, I just have the Pesce del Giorno. And they say, we do too. We just love it. It's so terrific. And I think at one point they tried to take it off the menu, and they just couldn't do it.
There was a revolt.
Because it was so popular.
Right.
Totally delicious.
So tell me what you pair with a meal like this. I mean, what are we we looking at in terms of wines or spirits or things like that? What's on the list?
They have gorgeous wines. They have they have a beautiful Gavi on the menu, which is a white wine that's just totally terrific. And they have some gorgeous Valpolicella. And they really, Jen Matta, who does the wine list, she brings a lot of beautiful Italian wines in by the bottle or by the glass. At the beginning of the meal, what I always encourage people to start with is what we call a spritz, which is Aperol, which is a little aperitif, if you will. It's a bitter orange aperitif paired with Prosecco, and it's served on the rocks. So it's a little bit of this Aperol, and then like maybe a quarter Aperol, 3/4 Prosecco on the rocks. It's the most refreshing drink to have at the beginning of the meal. And that's what I encourage people to have, because and the spritz, or the Aperol spritz, is kind of an old-fashioned cocktail that's making a huge comeback in Italy. And it's making its way here, and people have been drinking it here in Providence.
And then what about dessert? How do we top off this meal?
Well, dessert there is my favorite. They make beautiful fruit tarts to order. So when you have dinner at Bacaro, you order your dessert with the meal because they make it while you're eating. And I always get one of their baked fruit tarts, whether it's plums or raspberries or apricots or blueberries or blackberries, and then they serve it usually with a little creme anglaise or a little ice cream on the side. And I just want to eat the crust. The crust is so delicious; it's to die for. I would just order the crust. I could just order the crust.
Of an extra helping of
like,
crust.
Can I just have the crust?
Right.
So good.
And how much are we going to spend on a meal here?
Anywhere from $40 to $60 a person, pretty easily.
All right. Thank you for the great restaurant recommendation. Are you ready to play a little game?
Sure.
This game is called Out of the Frying Pan. Here's how it works. I'm going to ask you for a series of rapid-fire recommendations. Just tell me the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
All right, we talked about calamari. Where's your favorite place to get calamari in the city of Providence?
Oh, just one place, Zuma, because they pan-fry their calamari, and usually most places deep-fry it, but they pan-fry it in skillets that are like 20 years old. They're beautiful, perfectly seasoned. And they add roasted garlic and white balsamic vinegar.
Obviously, you're right there on the water, and seafood's, easily accessible. Where's the best place to get seafood?
I think Hemingway's would probably be a really good place to get seafood. Right there on South Water Street with their beautiful windows, great view of the river, terrific spot.
I know mixology is coming up quite a bit in Rhode Island. In fact, one of our other speakers is Frank Martucci from the Bartenders Guild, and he's going to do a session along with Brent Ryan, the distiller of Thomas II Rum, on the history of rum in New England at the Taste Trekkers conference.
Oh, wow, that's great.
So I know that cocktails is becoming a big thing there. What's the place with the best cocktail list?
I'm thinking the Dorrance is the best place for a cocktail.
Well, look at that. We just happened. I swear this wasn't planned. That's actually where we're doing our cocktail reception. So tell me a little bit about the Dorrance.
Great. Yeah, beautiful room, right down city. It's, just a gorgeous spot.
Obviously, there's a lot of colleges there, fantastic universities in Providence. You've got, Brown University, you've got Johnson & Wales, you've got Rhode Island School of Design, you've got Providence College. And so there's Parents' Weekend, or a couple of them that come up in the fall. If you are bringing your parents to town and you want to take your parents out to a nice restaurant, where's the best place to take your parents to?
Well, I think the best place to take your parents is on my tour of Federal Hill.
Ah.
But I think there's so many. Let's see. The best place is probably going to be Pane Vino up on Federal Hill. Well, I love Pane Vino because it's small, it's quiet, it's intimate. They've got a fabulous building there in the old hardware building that was on Federal Hill for years. And you could chat, you could talk, you can have great Italian food. The service is fabulous. The food is terrific. I think that might be a great spot. And you can walk up Federal Hill. You
mentioned the farms there that are supplying a lot of the food to the restaurants. Is there a farm worth visiting while you're in Rhode Island?
Well, my favorite farm is called the Dame Farm, D-A-M-E, the Dame Family Farm. They have a fabulous history here in Rhode Island. They have the world's best peaches that pair terrifically with prosciutto. They have blueberries, they have corn, they have zucchini and eggplant. It's a terrific farm, and they've been farming in Rhode Island, for a couple generations, 3-4 generations now.
All right, last question. Where's your favorite place to go for brunch?
I think it's going to be Nick's on Broadway.
And you mentioned that place a couple of times. I knew you were going to say that because you'd mentioned it a couple times. So tell me a little bit more about Nick's on Broadway.
Well, Nick's on Broadway is great. They make their own breads. They make muffins. They make beautiful omelets. They have granola that they make in-house. You can get fish. You can get all kinds of beautiful things at Nick's. And it's a destination restaurant as well as a super little neighborhood restaurant.
All right. Thank you for playing. That was Out of the Frying Pan. You did fantastic. Now we know all the places to go when we come in for the Taste Trekkers conference. Your recommendation was Bacaro. That's at 262 South Water Street in Providence. People can find it online at Bacaro, Bacaro, restaurant.net. And tell me about you, Cindy, if people want to follow you on social media, if they want to go on one of your food tours, how do they find you?
I'm easy to find. I'm at Savoring, SAVORING, SavoringRhodeIsland.com. My Twitter handle is Cindy Salvato, and the same with my Facebook page is Cindy Salvato. Salvato is my last name. I do tours of Federal Hill, and every once in a while I do different tours. Like we did a historic culinary tour of Bristol, Rhode Island, and we did an oyster tour once. So every once in a while I throw in something different, but mostly the mainstay is my Federal Hill tour, which books months in advance. So book now. Like right now I'm booking into October.
Wow. All right. So people got to get on there early. Again, I want to say that you've just played an absolutely pivotal role in bringing the Taste Trekkers Food Tourism Conference to Rhode Island and to Providence, and you've been really helpful. When we needed somebody to go on TV, you were the person that stepped up and went on TV for us in Providence and talked about it, and you helped us out with the Kickstarter campaign as we were raising money for this thing, and kicked in some tour slots so that we could give those away as prizes. And people can see you, of course, on the panel that's being hosted by, like I said, Gail Ciampa, the food editor of the Providence Journal. Thank you so much for all your help with that. And thank you for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
My name is Seth Ressler. A couple of show notes before we go. First of all, obviously, Taste Trekkers Food Tourism Conference, the nation's first event for people who plan their vacations around food. That is happening in Providence, Rhode Island, September 20th, 21st, and 22nd. You can see people like Cindy and a lot of others there who are all about this. They're all about planning your vacations around food. Head over to the website, TasteTrekkerscom, TasteTrekkers.com. While you're there, subscribe to the podcast. You can find us on iTunes, leave a review. That helps us out quite a bit. You can also follow us on social media. You can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. We are now Taste Trekkers on Twitter. And if you want to be a guest, just click the Contact Us link, send us an email, and we would love to have you on to talk about the culinary scene in your city. Thanks so much for listening.
This is the Fine Dining Podcast. You can find links to the places mentioned in this episode at TasteTrekkers.com. TasteTrekkers.com. Thank you for listening.